Bitcoin has officially entered its worst day since the bear market of 2022. That came at a time when DeFi was collapsing on Ethereum, Luna was collapsing, and just a few months later, the FTX collapse happened, wiping out billions of dollars in the market, which we're only just starting to see come back to the market 2.5 years later. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. This particular time in the market can give us timeframes to work with for when things might get better. If you like that, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It's your home of macro cycle analysis with me, Jason Pizzino. I'm going to cover the stock markets, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and of course, blend this all together with the real estate cycle. So if you do want to support no BS trading and investing analysis and research, by all means, hit the like and share it with a friend that may have got burnt through this period in the market. So let's start our analysis with the big one that has just happened in the last few minutes. Extreme fear on the fear and greed index. Now, this is the index that we've been following for many years on the channel. And to me, this is the best one to use, not the coin market cap index, which can be useful, but this one here really pinpoints when people are, or retail investors are the most fearful. Basically, when they are wrecked, dead, destroyed, blood on the street. If you see some blood, this one can always take it even further and bring out the worst of things. Basically, an absolute bashing into the market, and you see just pretty much how bloody it is out in the street. Okay, so now that I've got that out of the way, this one has come up now as the worst day since 2022. We have to go all the way back to this zone here, and it comes up a little nicer on this Bitcoin chart. So you can see we've hit 10 in the last 24 hours, and taking this back, we even outdid the low of August in 2024. We outdid the lows through the FTX collapse, and we are now back to the June collapse, basically when DeFi had its final nail in the coffin. Through May, that was the Luna collapse, then the DeFi collapse, and then it was the FTX. So the fear that the market is now experiencing is unlike anything the market has experienced for the last 2.5 years. Yes, you could say, well, it was worse times throughout this period. You had the March drop with the banking crisis. You did have the FTX collapse. But in terms of purely looking at the market sentiment using the crypto fear and greed index, which has a lot to do with the Bitcoin price, which of course means, well, Bitcoin basically runs the show. If there's nothing going on in Bitcoin, there's pretty much not much going on for the rest of the altcoin market. So this is the god, this is the king of the degenerate space. So we have to respect what the data shows for the king here. And so the king has to go all the way back to June 2022 for a look at how bad the market sentiment got. But the silver lining here is that we can start to pinpoint some turning points. Now, if you've got patience, this is going to be very easy, but we know from a fact that the majority of people don't have patience in the game. They want to be rich and they just want to be out of their jobs or some other sort of painful moment that they're in their life very quickly. And that's pretty much why they come to altcoins and meme coins. They just want to gamble on something to get themselves out of another problem. But before they realize, they're putting themselves into another problem situation. So unless you can overcome the problems that are in your life, you're just going to drag those issues somewhere else. So you can either do that by developing your own plans. You can do that by improving your personal finance. You can do that by improving your life. Now, you can do this a number of ways, but if you want to speed it up, the best way to do it is to look at some sort of form of education. That is entirely up to you, but I'm going to suggest looking at TIA Premium. We do have a sale coming up very soon, so check that link out in the video description. This one right here, the weekly report, and your name will be on the email list there for when that goes live. And in the meantime, you can check out the free Discord, scroll over to TIA Reviews, and have a look at what all the members are saying about TIA, the profits, their learnings, how they've been growing in their personal life, whether it's their financial life as well. That is a really good place to have a look at what people are actually doing with the course. And once you're in that, you can have a look at all the courses here and then the amount of trading education and investing education that you get, along with an active community of traders and investors. So we've had a look at TIA Premium. We've had a look at the Fear and Greed Index, basically the worst time in the last, 2.5 years. But when is this thing going to turn around? Let's have a look at a few more points here. We've seen the liquidations now over the last 3 days basically equal what happened in February 2nd and 3rd. So it was about $2.7 billion worth of liquidations through that period. And in the last 3 days, we've had roughly about the same number of liquidations. So this is a good sign for the markets to start turning. You've got the long and the short ratio getting a little bit out of whack here on the short side, 51.5% to the shorts and 48.5% to the long. So there's a lot more people piling into the shorts. Along with that, the daily exchange volume has begun to tick up. Remember, we talked about this a few days ago, around the 20th to the 22nd, when that data started to come through. It looked like we might be seeing some sort of low. And at the moment, there is a lower low here, but we're starting to see a turn up. So the lower low to look out for is around 42 billion on the exchange volume, with the current high in around 56 billion. So in terms of a time frame, this is what happened through September and October, when the market started to bottom, put in higher lows on the price chart, and then eventually start to take off again. You can see the low here at around 28 billion, then 28, then 29, and slowly but surely the exchange volume begun to pick up again. So this process took about 2 months there. That's the first point that I want to look at when it comes to the time frames that we could look at, as we may be putting in some sort of low here with the market sentiment resetting. On top of that, so here's the next point, number of coins bonded per day. And this is looking at pump fund. So the pump fund era, basically shit coins going out to the market where the gamblers meet. Hopefully, if the market survives this period and goes into the next stage of the cycle, you're going to make some money and not get caught up in the gambler's mindset. Of course, there are always going to be people that do this, and we probably need a few more of them to come back to the market. But at the end of the day, if you want to be making money, try to avoid anything that sounds like it's too good to be true, money that is too easy to make, because as easy it is to get, it's just as easy to lose. And without any experience with that, the emotional stability of the market and trading and investing, it's very likely that you're going to give all those gains back again. So after my little rant there, the point of this is that we're seeing the number of coins bonding almost at zero, just next to my head here. And you're basically seeing the old saying of believe in something is now believe in nothing. It's almost dead to the point of no one's making these things again, because no one is basically trading these things. So on the one hand, it could be a good time to be buying up some of the lows, but where do those lows come in? If you're buying the dip, there is still the possibility of the lows going 50% lower than where they currently are. So that's the next piece of the puzzle. We're looking at how the market is basically dying. And just the other day on X, I even had comments from people saying that it's all over, we're wrecked, we're leaving. I see comments often as well of people saying that they're selling out and they're not coming back. That's probably a good sign that we're somewhere around the low. But how much time is left? Well, we also have the traditional markets to contend with, as they have been putting in they've been testing some of the previous lows and closing very cautiously around the 50% levels. So if we see the traditional markets also begin to head down, that doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin is going to dump further, but we might not see that sustained rally for BTC come back in until we see some sort of low form for the S&P in particular, and potentially even the NASDAQ as well, which has been closing underneath the 50% level for a couple of days now. So we want to see these markets turn around. But if they keep going down, it's still not a breakdown of the macro structure here. It might just be moving towards a nice anchor point for the market where we would see a higher low form, and those price points are still the same as we looked at over the last couple of days for the NASDAQ. You don't really want to see anything break under 19,900. We'd have to then come back and revise what our strategy is here for Bitcoin and cryptos. But for now, not really an issue being 21,150 points. And for the S&P 500, also still in this trading range of the last 3 months, going all the way back to the pump from the Trump election, okay? But yes, the market has definitely slowed down at this point, and my next target for this particular move comes somewhere in around 58 points, 5,800 points, that is, for the S&P 500. So looking for that potential low there. Now, in terms of the sentiment for the stock market, it's also been an extreme fear for the last couple of days. You had extreme fear today, 26th, or the last trading day there. The day before, 25th, you also had 22, so extreme fear. Day before that was fear, and then basically it's come down from neutral. So when this occurs, and you can see this line here for the 128-day moving average, the last time this happened, as the market came down with extreme fear, it came back to test the 125-day moving average. Just taking a quick look at the fear and greed index overlaid with the moving average. So it's getting a little bit close here, which isn't a bad sign. It could just be a sign that we're getting somewhere around the low. It doesn't mean this is the low, but at least it's getting somewhere around that point. And a lot of the other indicators here are reading extreme fear, put and call options are extreme fear, volatility is at neutral, safe haven demand, whatever these ones mean, but basically anything that people are looking at is into that extreme fear. And this is the one that I focus mostly on, being that it is the market sentiment. So the other charts that we look at when it comes to the markets are the global markets. And for Europe in particular, they've had a pretty strong day, but it could be leading into some sort of lower high. We'll know over the next 1 or 2 days if it can push higher and close above it. Otherwise, say in the case of the UK, looks like it's running into another lower high. Looks like Germany may be running into a lower high. We've got to see whether it can sustain this and keep pushing higher. France has also been putting in a couple of little lower highs here, and the Dutch market also down. The only one that's bucking the trend here are the Italians pushing into new fresh highs. So why the hell does this matter to Bitcoin and cryptos? Well, if I'm just tracking the trends of the global markets along with the US markets, which are still churning around, then I think it could be just that little bit longer for Bitcoin. And then, of course, cryptos are going to take that much longer on top of that to turn around and start to come back. But that gives some good buying opportunities if you have your buy signals, your sell signals, maybe even your stop losses in case the market goes against you. So now that takes us over to BTC and a look at these time frames for the market sentiment. So this seems to be all sort of lining up for something like March for a potential low or a basing pattern to be forming. That seems to be what it's lining up at the moment, as we looked at with the sentiment and the crypto indicators here, liquidations, exchange volume, fear and greed index finally hitting 10 here at the lowest point for the last 2.5 years. And in terms of timing, we are now, we being the market, are down 97 days from the peak of the sentiment. The peak of the sentiment was 22nd of November, around where the market jumped. Bitcoin jumped from 95 up to 99K. And yeah, that same day just fell short of 100K by a couple $100. So I'm looking at the peak of the sentiment, and this can grind around from extreme greed to greed, touched neutral a couple of times here, and just couldn't maintain the sentiment. But the headlines and comments, especially around this period in January with the inauguration, was the same. I mean, I want to call them idiots because it's the same dickheads. Well, I went from idiots to dickheads. Same morons, any word I can choose here, that say that this time is different. Trump's in. What do you know? You're from Australia. It's just the same jargon and talk over and over again to tell you why this is just the start of something big. And it happens at every single top inauguration here. The Trump coin launch, the Melania coin launch, the Hawk tour was somewhere around here too. It was just the most stupid shit that you could imagine. And then it was all the keyboard warriors at the same time saying, you can't, to sell at this time is just stupid. We're just getting started. I don't know if they're trolls, probably, if it's bots, if it's, AI bots that are produced from these meme companies, and they really have, it's just a robot telling you something. But it happens every single time that you get this extreme noise of a top generally on lowering interest or lowering sentiment. And then it's a matter of time until these things start to break down. Now, it could have been that we held up here at the 90K, but nonetheless, it was still a long time of the price going nowhere. And then when we look at it in terms of timing, you being here probably got some decent patience to yourself. Let me know, hit the like button, share it with a friend, maybe someone who got destroyed here and that you want to tell them they're idiots, who knows? But yeah, 97 days it's been since that peak. So more data points for the time frames from peak to trough of human sentiment when it comes to these consolidation periods, if you will, or downtrends, which essentially they are from a peak to a low. The last one we saw was last year when Bitcoin ran up to 74K. It took 120 days to go from the peak price, and it was the second highest greed level, or extreme greed. You had 90 on the 5th of March, and then you had 88. So very close, but we're looking at this reading here. That was 120 days to go to the first reading of extreme fear at 25. A few days earlier, it hit 26. So it could be somewhere around 110, 115 days. But you did see it hit that extreme fear 120 days from the extreme greed of the previous old all-time high. So how does that compare to where we are now? Well, we're at 97 days from the top. Doesn't mean it has to be, you know, that exact time frame, but it's interesting to note that these things generally take, in this case, you're at 4 months. We are currently at just over 3 months from that extreme greed, or the first peak that we saw. Let's take it back another consolidating period. Oh, before we do, the extreme of the high of the greed to the extreme low of the fear was 154 days. So that was 5 months. So in this period, it was roughly 4 to 5 months to go from the top extreme emotion to the bottom extreme emotion. Essentially, like, you go from having the best time of your life to the worst time of your life. It takes about 4 to 5 months as a collective. What about last time? In 2023, we saw a peak up here in greed. Remember, this was still at, this wasn't into a raging bull market. And in this period of March, April, a lot of people, the majority of people still thought this was a bear market rally. And, you know, if you've been here on the channel, hit the like button if you have. Let us know that this, at this time, we were talking about the beginning of a bull market, and the bull market beginning from November. Reason being was what we saw in March. But enough on that, because I mentioned that almost every damn video. Looking at the time frame again is about 5 months, 148 days from the peak of the greed to the bottom of the fear on the sentiment. 148 days, and then 2024, 154 days. Isn't it uncanny that collectively, how many millions of people are in these markets, and collectively, it took them 5 months again to go from extreme greed to to the most fearful. They went from greed to fear, and it still took them 5 months to run through all of the emotions of, it could be on, it could be off, we're going through it, it's going to happen, no, it's not, because we're dropping. I find it crazy when you start to and analyze how humans behave in the market. 5 months. Okay, let's take it back again. Have a look at the bull market peak of 2021, or the first peak here. And so you can look at this top is around 91 on the Fear and Greed Index. You had another one, that was 95. That was the peak there, 95. And then it basically ran down to this low here in April. That was a pretty severe drop off there. That took about 110 days, so just short of the 4 month period. But that's not to the low. I'm looking at an extreme point to another extreme point, because that was a very, very severe drop. Now, we did run up into greed for quite some time, so I'll take it from the final extreme greed. And there was also a lot of data, there is a lot of data around that January period of insiders selling out, whales selling out, because of how extreme that move from 20K to 40K was. And so a lot of people thought that was the final peak, but it happened to run again all the way up to 60, 65,000. But this period here was a very, very extreme greed period, as you can see here on the chart. And then, yeah, of course, there was some more of that on-chain data to show people selling there. Okay, so in terms of the time frame, let's take it out to this low here in May. We did a live stream on that day there, it was around the 20th of May, my time, 19th for the charts here. 20,000 people on the live stream that day on YouTube. And that was a huge, huge dump for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So in essence, in the psyche of the traders, it was about 133 days. So about 15 to 20 days short of that 5-month period. Now, if we run it out again to the next lows in June, this extreme point, look at that. It's a reading of 10 on the fear and greed index, similar to what we're at now. You have 144 days. And from that point, you started to get higher lows. There was one more reading of 10 here in June, and then a second here in July. So another double, triple bottom of the fear. And then just looking at these time frames before it started to rally, it was about 144 days. So again, 5 months, roughly, just a few days short of 5 months. Now, I'm not looking at anything in the bear market because I think these are different times. I don't think we're in the midst of a bear market yet. There will be signs to suggest if it does change, we'd have to break down from some of the key support levels, the big swing breakdowns, the 50% breakdown. So if we get to that point, I'll come back and revisit this. So I'm not going to look at any of the data through here, but look at what happens if it's not long enough through that period. In 2019, ran up to a peak, 14K after it broke out from 4K. That was a huge time in the market. I remember those days, it was just like we were going to go to a new all-time high the next day. It was just crazy how fast this thing ran up. But then within 19 days, it ran from one of the most extreme greed readings you've ever seen at 95, and it ran down to extreme fear at 16 within 19 days. So there just wasn't enough time for the market to digest what the severity of this correction was going to be. And then that started to drag out to August, dragged out again to September, October, November, December, and then it started to rally. We had COVID, but by that stage, it looked like a lot of the buying had happened. You got this freak event that was an absolutely fantastic opportunity. And you could see from there was just no more lower lows. You had the low here in March 13th, Friday that is, higher lows, higher lows, higher lows. And it was just getting bought up really, really quickly and came back to this previous support zone, previous accumulation zone relatively quickly after the worst event you could imagine in your living memory as a trader or investor. So that's why I say that this movement here ran up really, really quickly. So in terms of the timing here, if it's too quick going from extreme greed to extreme fear, it's just going to take more time. You can come out to the next reading here at 5, absolutely disgusting reading that took 2 months. So still too short. It kept going down. You can see from the price, it keeps going down. 3 months later, price is still going down, breaking down. 4 months later, price has a rally and then keeps going down. 5 months later, you start to find the base. 152 days, basing out around $6,500. December happens. Yes, the extreme greed reading was extreme fear was slightly lower, but the price was roughly the same, 6.5K, and the base at around $6,900. Call it 7K. Yes, this movement happened, but through this period, extreme fear started to run up and have a sustained move to the upside that hit greed, freak move, market started again. So now that we have an anchor point, we've looked at the history of humanity in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and what they tend to do time after time after time. Where does that put us out for the low or maybe even a higher low to come in for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies? Now, you could just measure 50 days from this point, but I will put a proviso on this, and I'll get to that in just a second. Let's go out to 150 odd days. That is going to come out in around April. Now, I also want to look at the 4-month period because that has happened before. And the reason being I want to look at some shorter time frames is because we find ourselves in new all-time high territory, provided the price remains above this, above the previous top set around 65, 70K, potentially even the 74K. So somewhere between 65 and 75, as long as price remains above these levels. I'm going to look at some shorter time frames, and I'll tell you why in just a second. 120 days takes you out to about mid-March. Around some of those seasonal dates, you've got the equinox happening between the seasons for us, going into autumn, for you guys in the north, going to your springs for summertime. There's about 120 days. Now, the reason I'm doing that, provided price remains in a strong position, is we could take it back to 2017. We don't have any fear and greed index data for that. This thing only started in, January, February of 2018. But this period when Bitcoin broke to new highs, the time frames from the tops to the lows, then the higher lows, then the next breakout again, got shorter and shorter on the way up to that historic all-time high of nearly $20,000. And so if we are in something like this where the movements potentially get faster, then I suspect we're not going to go through that sort of 150 days of understanding what's going on here, from the emotions going from peak to trough. So I need to keep both of those in mind, because at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen on the black side of the chart. I'm just looking at what humans have done in the past, sharing that with you here. And if you do like what I'm sharing, hit the like button, share it with a friend. Maybe you can help them save themselves from losing all the gains and round tripping it next time around. So I am looking at both of those timeframes. Something in March, based on what we had also looked at with the other data for the stock markets. And then, of course, everything else that we've been piling up with you guys day after day here on the channel with all of the other crypto index information. Now, there's one more really important piece that I've been using to navigate the markets, that's for Bitcoin and cryptos, over this bull market. Just a reminder, we do have the TIA premium sale coming up in the next few hours. Link in the top of the video description, sign up to the email. You'll also get the free report coming through on Tuesdays as well. And you'll be able to access the free Discord, check out all the reviews from our members and maybe viewers as well. You guys that are watching, we like to post those there as well. And you can also check out the trading results here, positives, negatives, what our members are able to achieve with what they're learning with TIA Premium. Okay, so the last thing I look at here is the USDT dominance. And like we saw yesterday, it ran right up into the middle, the dead middle of the 5 to 5.3%. That was 2 days ago. So yesterday it actually ran up and touched almost dead on 5.3%, closed underneath the 50% at 5.24, and the short-term double bottom 150% level, which is at 5.1. Okay, so we're right in the middle of all of these price clusters, which at least for the last 24 hours, have been resistance to the market. So as we've been watching, bearish for crypto if this USDT dominance keeps rising, and that's exactly what has happened. But if this starts to break down, then we're going to see some more money flow back into altcoins. At the moment, there has been no reversal here. You've still got an uptrend on the daily, the 2-bar. The weekly is undecided here, but on the short term, there's still more movement to the upside. The very top price I would want to see this thing get to is around 5.5 to 5.65, which is the diagonal downtrend connected to a couple of these recent highs here. So you can see from the higher lows and so on. That's for Bitcoin. That's about as far as I want to see it go. And from there, or here, we start to get rejected over the coming days, which lines up with what we've been talking about for the timeframes of the crypto fear and greed index, and we start to see this thing break down again. That would mean that buyers are stepping back in after basically all of the degens and the altcoin specialists and investors in memes and all this BS, right? They have basically left the game and the profits have been taken into USDT. And then these guys might be putting their USDT back into wherever those strong coins are, ideally starting with Bitcoin and then starting to float it back out into the rest of the market. My game plan at the end of this, or my hope for the whole space, is that we do break down past these previous lows at 3.7, because that would send things absolutely flying. But for now, we've just got to take it as it comes. And at the moment, it's still sitting at a precautious area. Is that the right word? 5.2%. Okay. You start to see this thing break up, not great. We want to start to see this thing break down probably over the coming weeks, as I've been talking about, sometime into March. Now, there are some good signs that the trends might be beginning to change, but we haven't done it yet. The trends have not started to change. So I'm being quite cautious here. Like, subscribe, sale is on, link in the top of the video description, and I'll see you guys back here at the next video. Till then, take care and peace out.